Hey guys, welcome back. Very casual video today. So I've been trying something new this year. I usually get chicks in the spring and raise them in the spring, but over the years I've heard a lot of good things about raising chicks in the fall, and I've been reading up a lot on actually even raising chicks in the winter. So even though the weather is very unseasonably warm right now for us, it is October in Wisconsin. It's gonna turn cold very quickly here, and actually it has been much colder than it is now, and we've been raising our chicks outside. Now, everything I had always been taught was that you have to raise chicks inside. You have to raise them with either a radiant heat brooder or a heat lamp, which is still true, but I had always been taught that you can't raise them outside. And in fact, I've actually had people message me and say they tried to raise them outside and they all died because it was too cold. So that was something I always thought was a mistake. But the more I look into it, the more I learned that actually it can be done. It just has to be done in a very specific way. And there are some pretty good arguments for raising chicks in the fall especially, but even if it has to be done in the winter, say you have a broody hen who decides that she wants to go broody and hatch some eggs then, which is not unheard of, that there are definitely things you can do to do it safely. So total transparency here, I am just raising mine in the fall. I'm gonna tell you everything I'm doing to raise them in the fall, even with some quite cool weather and colder weather quickly approaching. But I am gonna go over those tips for raising them in the winter also. I'm just gonna show you guys all the threads that I've been reading. I'm gonna link them for you so you can do all your own research as well. But I think it is super, super interesting. So yeah, let's take a look at the chicks right now, just show you guys how they're doing. If you just want to jump to any specific section, I always leave the timestamps for you below. But let's check out these babies. Well, hello, my pretties. And if you guys can see, they're all sidling up to the edge here, and this is because they want their GrubTerra. I am gonna get their GrubTerra for them right now. The GrubTerra training has been going really well. I swear this is like the secret weapon for raising chicks that actually like you and that turn into chickens that like you too. So thank you to GrubTerra for partnering with us on today's video and allowing all this good info to get out there. There is enough for everyone. They're not quite to the place where they're eating it out of my hand yet, but they're very quickly getting there. They'll probably be there in a couple weeks or so. Okay, so regarding raising chicks in cooler weather, probably the most popular time of year to get chicks is usually in the spring. And that's because when chicks are born, they don't really have the feathering to withstand cold weather. So kind of the traditional method of raising chicks is where you bring the chicks into your home. I do have videos about this setup that we use when we raise chicks inside. There are many advantages, one of them being that they are basically completely safe from predators inside your house. You can keep kind of a better eye on them. I mean, I'm not at all trying to bash that way. I just wanted to explore something else this year. So if you want all the info on raising chicks inside, I will link those videos for you below. This year I wanted to raise them in the fall because the timing was just not conducive for us to get them in the spring. We just weren't ready for them. But also I have heard that it can actually be better to raise them in the fall. And here's why. Because a lot of times when you get them in the spring, the weather is very unpredictable and you're timing kind of the colder weather with their lower feathering. So it's like as weather's warming up, they're feathering out more, so you don't really know when they are going to be able to be outside full time, especially because they're not acclimated to that cold weather. The difference with raising chicks in the late summer or the fall, the idea with the way that I've been doing it is that they're going outside during the warm weather. So when they have the least feathering, they're actually going out when the weather is warmest. And as they're getting more feathering, the weather is progressively getting cooler and cooler. Now, of course, nothing is perfectly constant, but that's kind of the general idea. Another thing I want to add is actually one of the really nice parts about raising them in the fall is that then they reach their laying age right as the days are starting to get longer again. So in the spring, they're usually about ready to lay. If you get chicks in the spring, it takes them quite a while to reach laying age, and usually they're not laying until kind of the end of summer, if not even into fall. And then by the time fall and winter come, they kind of slow down on the laying majorly, if not completely, because that's just what happens during the fall and the winter. So you kind of are adding a bunch of feed and not getting a whole bunch of eggs out for that first year. Versus since I'm raising them in the fall right now, we're feeding them through the fall and winter, and then we're gonna get spring, summer, and fall of next year with plenty of eggs. And we will definitely be preserving them for next winter too. So I think it does result in a little bit better of a feed to egg conversion ratio. I am gonna go over a few main points that you wanna consider if you're getting chicks outside in cold weather. But I do want to just let you know that when I was looking into getting chicks in the fall, I was terrified. My worst fear was that they were not gonna be able to handle the cold weather, that they were gonna get sick or they were gonna die, and it was gonna be my fault, and they would be these helpless creatures that depend on me. So believe me when I say, if you are nervous, I totally understand. I do believe it's warranted. I think we should take their lives seriously, but know that that feeling is completely natural. So what made me decide to go ahead and get them in the fall? Well, I came across this internet thread. One of my favorite sites for chicken knowledge is backyardchickens.com. It is a forum with a lot of really knowledgeable chicken people who share their stories. They tend to be really good about sharing photos and updating as time goes on. And I have learned a lot from this forum, so I always recommend that you check it out. What was interesting is I found quite a few threads of people who are raising chicks outside in the winter in climates like ours, where it was single digits, if not sometimes even less than 0 degrees Fahrenheit. One member said that the whole reason it started was because she had a broody hen in the middle of winter who would not stop being broody, and she eventually just said, fine, you want to raise chicks, you want to make that mistake, then go for it. And she was amazed when the mama hen raised chicks in single digit weather outside, and they were fine. I wouldn't have believed it, except I was looking at the photos she shared of adorable fluffy little chicks outside in the snow, and apparently they would just kind of dart away from mom and then dart back to mom when they needed to warm up again. Now, I want to make it clear this is not something I'm advocating for. It's not something I'm telling people, especially if you're a beginner, that you should do, because there are plenty of places that can go wrong. But what I am going to do is, if it's something that you're considering, I'm going to go over all the points that I consider to be very important, that you have your bases covered, and a lot of the things that I learned from these threads, which obviously I will link for you below. Number one is, if you're gonna raise chicks outside in the winter, the first thing you're gonna need absolutely is a draft-free coop or a draft-free living area. If this is something that is new to you, if you're a beginner, you might wanna go and look at some other sources first, because this is something that if you get wrong, it can go bad fast. You want there to be ventilation, but you want it to be draft-free where the chicks themselves are gonna be. So usually that means ventilation up high, chicks down low. This is always pretty important with chickens, but it is absolutely imperative with chicks because they don't have the feathering that they need to withstand the cold. So when I've had people message me and tell me they put chicks outside too early and the chicks all died, my belief is that a large part of it comes from the problem where there is too much airflow and there is not some place where heat can sort of build on itself and the chicks can get away from the cold. So that brings me to point number 2, which is that a mama hen or a radiant heat brooder is absolutely imperative. You guys know I'm not big on heat lamps. I'm not gonna get into that debate here, but this is why I'm saying this is not something I'm gonna endorse. It's just, this is a resource I wanna share with people right now. This forum is because what a lot of people would do to raise chicks outside in the winter is either have a mama broody hen or recreate one. And the way that a lot of people would do this is to take a heating pad. Again, not something I'd recommend. The heating pads say all over them, don't leave it unattended. I know that that was somewhat of a concern, but I believe this concept can be taken and made a little more safe. So what a lot of people would do is they would take a heating pad, provide the heat source from above, more similar to how a mama hen would, and then they would put a lot of insulating material around the heating pad. So the idea is you're creating a fake mama hen, a cove where the chicks can go in winter and they can warm up. They go in and out, and the idea is that it will trap that heat in there and the chicks can go in and out as they need to. It's a fairly simple concept, but it is different than just putting a radiant heat brooder into a coop, especially if that coop is not draft free. So again, the idea is that you're creating pockets of temperature. So maybe even though everything else is really cold outside and even maybe really windy, you want there to at least be some area where chicks can go and there is not gonna be wind, there's not gonna be drafts, and it is gonna be so toasty warm. As similar as you possibly can to a mama hen raising chicks. If this is something you're into, I'm just giving you like the preview. This is not a how-to video. If this is something that you wanna think about doing for yourself, I really encourage you to check out the threads below and use it as inspiration. Now, when I did my fall chicks, I was not comfortable using a heating pad by itself. I know that many people do it. It's just not something I'm comfortable with. What I'm comfortable with are these radiant heat brooders. You guys know I'm huge on them. I know that the radiant heat brooders for chicks are already designed to be out in a coop, or they don't say that they have to be supervised at all times. As usual, I'll link that for you guys if you don't know what that is, or if you don't have one. Highly recommend if you ever get chicks, or if you are thinking about getting chicks in the future. What I was gonna do is I was gonna take a radiant heat brooder, and then I was going to try and trap as much heat as I could by placing that brooder in places like next to the wall of the coop. I was thinking, I haven't done this and I'm not recommending it, but an idea that I had was possibly using tin foil to kind of create walls around the radiant heat brooder in case not enough heat was becoming trapped. Now these things are not nearly as much of a fire hazard as heat lamps are, not even close, but I am super careful. I try to be super careful. I didn't really want anything touching the radiant heat brooder, so I kind of put the radiant heat brooder in the corner of the chicken coop, but my plan was if that wasn't enough, then I was going to kind of surround it with like tin foil or something that is not like super flammable type thing. Here's the funny thing, I didn't even need to do that. And that's partly because I'm doing this in the fall and not the winter. So far the lowest temperatures we've had with these chicks outside, we actually had some nights right when we got them that were kind of in the mid 40s in Fahrenheit. But even when they were tiny babies and they had this radiant brooder and night temperatures were kind of in the mid 40s, they were actually fine. And I really believe the key is that that coop does not have any drafts. We built it brand new, and I checked on them multiple times those nights to see if they were too cold. What I was looking for was chicks who were all huddled together, especially if they were standing up trying to get closer to the heat source, which was above them. And amazingly, what I found every time I came out is they were always on the outside of the brooder. So they weren't even completely underneath it. It was not even close to them being too cold. So as you guys can see, they have just been thriving. I have been pretty amazed with, as long as there is a nice warm heat pocket for them, which means drafts are not coming through and mixing the cold air with the warm air, I've been pretty amazed at how well they're doing. If you want to raise chicks in the dead of winter, I really do recommend checking out those threads. There's a lot of good info on there from people who have actively done it. Am I planning on doing it this year? No, I'm not. First of all, I have too many chicks already, and I know I'm gonna want more in this spring. But second of all, I really want to start raising chicks with a broody mama hen, so I'm hoping some of these girls go broody. I got Orpingtons for that reason specifically. They're actually English Orpingtons. But that's kind of the last thing I'm gonna talk about in this video, is just that I've been trying to move in a direction of raising chicks and chickens that is just as natural as possible. And again, I actually don't believe there's anything harmful about raising them inside. I think it's probably the best situation for especially most beginners. I think it's too much to try and manage predator protection and temperature control and just knowing when chicks are too cold or not. I think for a beginner, it's too much. I do think there is definitely benefit to raising them inside the first time or the first few times. However, now that I've done it a few times, I am really enjoying having them raise themselves outside. And my concern was that they weren't gonna be friendly enough because we weren't around them very much, but they are so open to bribes. The GrubTerra is so helpful for making them love us. But I just love that, you know, it's not like they have lights being turned on and off after the sun has gone down, or obviously there's no heat lamp that is throwing off their light schedule. And believe it or not, birds are very sensitive to light. That's actually a large part of what regulates their laying, is how long the daylight is lasting. So I know that it affects hens when they're older, and I know that it affects birds, especially with their molting schedule. So I think I'd have to be crazy to not believe that it affects their little psyches or something as they're growing up. I don't know, I feel like it is healthier for them to have natural cycles with the weather and with the season. So again, I don't think it's harmful to raise them inside. I'm all for it for a lot of situations, but this has been a really positive experience, and I just kind of wanted to give you guys an update on why we're doing that and a little bit of how we're doing that. As usual, I'm linking everything that's relevant. This time I'll link the GrubTerra, I'll link the Radiant Heat Brooders. Side note, those Radiant Heat Brooders tend to go in and out of stock a lot. So if that's something that you are considering raising chicks either this fall, winter, or especially this spring, I really recommend those. So I will link those, and I would just get them as soon as you can. They're not always out of stock, but they are, I do get notifications that they go in and out of stock quite a bit. We actually have 3 or 4 of them at this point because we love them so much. So like I said, super casual video today. Just wanted to update you guys there. If you have raised chicks in the fall or winter, please leave a comment below, because I am still learning on this, and I know a lot of other people could learn from you too. What your experience has been. If it hasn't gone well, what maybe you think the mistake was, so that other people don't make that mistake too. That kind of stuff is always very helpful. So I'm just gonna take a few minutes and hang out with them, leave them on a positive note, and hopefully I'm leaving on a positive note with you too. Thanks for watching today, and we'll see you next time.